Hello everyone and welcome to the demonstration video. In this video we are covering Excel Chapter 2, which I believe is probably one of the more important skills, the more important knowledge you should be getting from the Excel portion in general, because what we're going to get into is how to use formulas and functions. So basically how to make Excel work for you. You'll see what I mean in a moment, but this video should be really interesting. So again, if you want to follow along or take notes, I provide the skeleton notes here. You could go ahead and download it, type out your notes, or print it out, write it out. And at least for this video, we're going to be using this document, Central Sierra. So again, if you want to follow along exactly with me, go ahead and download this document. I'll go ahead and do it myself. There we go. And just like with any file that you download from this course, you could just go ahead and double click it or open it to have it open up Excel. There we go. We'll let it load in. Oh, let me exit there. There we go. And for any document, make sure you go ahead and hit enable editing. Perfect. So before we get into how to use formulas and functions, we actually have to define what they are. So I'm going to take out my my Paint software once more. Okay, but right now let's just start with formulas. Okay, so with formulas, basically we're taking this back to math. So if you remember things with simple math, formulas is just any equation, any function that could calculate something. So for instance, something as simple as 1 plus 2. There we go. We have two numbers here. If you want to use formal terms, those are operands, but you'll have two numbers, maybe a couple of more, and it always equals, so we get the result. So 1 plus 2, 3. So you could have two numbers, you could have multiple, 2 plus 3 plus 1. And then that could also calculate as something. So 2 plus 3, 5, plus 1, 6. All right. And it doesn't have to be plus. We also have, so there's plus, minus, multiply, which in this course we indicate with the asterisk symbol. And then divide, which for us, it's the slash. There we go. So formulas, again, anything that could calculate. So you usually get a bunch of numbers that you could calculate with, and it will always calculate to something. So our results here. All right. Now, especially when we come to Excel, one concept you do need to remember is something called variables. So you probably saw this as your A plus B equals something. Maybe this is C. Variables are placeholders in which we could add different values to. So usually, a function like this doesn't really tell us much. It just means that if we add A and B together, whatever those values are, then it will make C. So what this means is if A, there we go. So A is again a placeholder for value. Maybe if A is 5 and B is 6, then we just get those placeholders. So if A is 5, then we just substitute it into this equation. So we just say, hey, okay, so this is 5. So if A is 5 and B is 6, again, you just plug it in. Then that means 5 plus 6 equals whatever C is, which we know for sure 5 plus 6 is 11. All right. And if any of these value changes over here, so let's say A is actually not 5, maybe A is 10. Then this entire equation will change as well. There we go. So A is no longer 5. That placeholder is actually holding 10. So we get that bucket. We dump the number into here. which means that 10 plus 6 is not 11. That's not true. 10 plus 6 is 16. So that would mean that Z is 16. Okay. So again, this should be back to your basic math, but make sure you understand this concept, especially with the variables first, before you get into using formulas. Or again, if you're more visual, maybe just using Excel will make it click easier. Okay. But you don't have to worry about, hey, we have to figure out what B is if we get values A and C. You don't have to worry about that. It's just going to be very straightforward. We have a bunch of values that we're doing calculations with, and it'll spit out something. The idea of variables and placeholders come into play with our cells. Okay, so let me go to our workbook that you downloaded. Again, that's the Central Sierra. And for formulas, we're just going to go out here. So we'll be using these tables in a moment when it comes to functions. But for formulas, just go to any cell that's not within these tables. So we'll go ahead. I'm going to choose L4 over here. And let me zoom in so you could actually see what I am doing. There we go. Actually, in this case, I'm going to do I4. Okay. Now for this, just go ahead and put in some random numbers. So for I4, I'm going to put 10. And I5, I'm going to put 8. Okay. Now, once you have at least 2 numbers in cells, go to any other cell that is other than those 2 that we put in numbers. For me, I'm going to put it in J4. And we're going to start creating a formula. So anytime we want Excel to calculate something for us, you are always going to start with the equal sign. The equal sign at the beginning of our cell always indicates to Excel that, hey, we want you to calculate whatever the next stuff I put in is. Without that equal sign, it will not calculate anything, so keep that in mind. Okay, now this version I'm going to have you type out directly. I'll show you another way to do this, but if we want, here, let's do this straightforward. So if we want to add 10 and 8, you could just type it in directly. So I could do 10 plus 8, and when you hit enter, it calculates for you. Click back into that cell which you did the formula. There we go. So the one that says whatever that calculation is, and you'll notice up here in the formula bar, it shows you the equals 10 plus 18, but when we look at the cell, it shows 18. So this kind of links back to chapter 1 when we did the auto sum, where you saw that big weird, it had like the name sum with cells in it, but when you looked at the cell itself, it calculated a number. This works the same way. So Excel will automatically show the calculation in the actual cells, but if you click into it, you could see if it's directly the text that was inserted or if it's a formula. All right, go ahead and click enter to get out of there. But yeah, you could go ahead and directly change that. You could go ahead and put direct calculations in there, but notice, so 10 plus 8, if I want to add whatever's in these 2 cells, kind of treated like variables, and I change, let's change I5 to 18. Notice that over here, the cell with a formula does not update because we're not using the cells, we're using direct numbers. So if we want to use cells, we actually have to type it in. So let's edit this formula. You could go ahead and double click, again, just like editing text. And let's delete these numbers. All right. And you could type in the cells in which you'll be using. So for example, if I want to use the number within I4, then you'll go ahead and type I4. And notice the I4 in your cell is colored. In this case, it's colored blue. And look, it points the blue over here to I4 with the number you have. If I delete the 4 and put in 5, I5, notice it takes it to I5. And if I accidentally do I15, it'll take it all the way down here. So that cool feature shows you that you are indeed choosing the cell you want to do. So I4, and then you just do your calculation. So if I want to do plus, you'll type in plus. And if we want to add it with whatever's in I5, then type in I5. And you'll see this one's colored differently in red, and I5 is highlighted in red, just to confirm that it is what we're choosing. Let me go ahead and do enter. So I always recommend hitting enter when you're working with pretty much any insertions, anytime you're editing text or numbers, formulas in a cell. I'll show you why in a moment. But go ahead and hit enter. There we go. And you'll see it calculates to 28. And now when I change any of these two cells, so let's say I4 is actually 7, this formula updates. So it acts very much like variables. I could change this to a big number. There we go. And it calculates for you. Any cell that isn't a part of this formula, like down here, notice it doesn't change because we haven't included I6 into it. But I could add I6 by once more double clicking into it to edit it, or you could click into the formula bar and then doing plus I6, enter. There we go. All right. So that's different ways in which you could use the formulas, and a lot of it is basically how you would type out math problems. Let me go ahead and go inside. You could still use parentheses. For example, if I want I4 and I5 to be multiplied by each other, you could put parentheses around them. I'm using my arrow keys to navigate back and forth, but you could also click into it. And let me replace this plus with the multiply symbol, which is an asterisk. And if I click enter, then it'll do that calculation. So you'll see up here in the formula bar, again, how you do the math calculation all depends on, again, how you type it out. All right, perfect. One last thing, and you'll notice, again, anytime you click into a cell, always, if you want to get out, you could either do enter, or if you don't want to save the changes you made, click your escape key, which is at the top left of your keyboard. The reason why I tell you this is go to another cell. We're going to practice another way of using cells for a formula. So maybe this one, we just want to do I5 plus I6. So I put my point at K4. It's an empty cell for us. And remember, start with the equals, the equal sign. That is very necessary for any formula of any function. And now instead of typing out the cell, I could just go over and click on it. And you'll see it's included within this formula. Then I could do plus and then click into I6. There we go. And you'll see that it does it. And when I hit enter, it does the calculation. You'll notice the reason why I tell you to hit enter or escape when editing or typing out your formulas is because, let me go in here. Let's say I'm done with doing this formula. I'm like, okay, I5 plus I6, perfect. Now I want to go and edit something else. If I click over here to another cell, oh, actually that one doesn't do it. Let me do here. Let's say we accidentally do like a plus, and I click here to another cell. It will keep on trying to add stuff into it. So anytime you're editing a formula or any cell and you try to click away, it could have unexpected consequences. So always use your enter key or your escape key. If I do escape, it gets rid of the changes I made, turns it back to normal. Okay, so those are formulas. You could go ahead and mess around with them. There are some simple formulas you will have to be including in your projects. And of course, this is nice to, again, you don't have to do the mental math in your head over and over again when putting in data. You could just use formulas to do it for you. Okay, so those are formulas. Now let's get into functions. Okay, so back to using Paint just to visualize some different parts of functions, which are very similar to formulas, but there is some things to keep in mind. Okay, so functions basically works like, again, like formulas, and actually we still started out with an equal sign, or at least Excel will start it with an equal sign. You'll see what I mean in a moment. But functions is basically, if you could think of functions like there's the quadratic formula in math, there's the Pythagorean theorem, or there's even things like you worked with the AutoSum in chapter 1. Functions is basically pre-made formulas that all we have to do is just give it the numbers we want it to work with, and it'll do its magic. You'll go ahead and calculate it and spit out the results, as long as we give it the correct amount of information. So when it comes to functions in Excel, usually they all have names. So different functions will do different things. The name, when we type it out, is usually in all caps. So for instance, we'll take it back to when you did the AutoSum. You may have noticed that within the cell, it had a big capitalized sum in it. That's the name of the function, and there will be different function names. Usually all of them are shortened, but they have, again, longer names, such as one of them you'll be working with is called CONCAT. That means concatenation, which I'll actually show in this demonstration video. So there's sum. Again, this is the function name. And you'll notice that after that function name, there were parentheses. These parentheses is the information we will feed to the function so it could actually work. We can't just say, hey, sum, and have it do something. Typically when we make a function on our own, or when we use a function on our own, we have to put something in the parentheses to actually work with. You'll notice when we did the AutoSum, the parentheses had cells in it, because hence the name auto, it was trying to detect numbers in which it could add up. In this case, the information we give it is called arguments, or also known as parameters. You'll see me use it interchangeably in my demonstration videos, as well as the projects. But just know arguments and parameters is just what you are feeding the function to work with. So with sum, it could be, we could do a selection of cells. So you could put in cells, like let's say maybe we want to get the sum of B1 to B2. Then they'll go ahead and add everything together in B1 and B2. So if this is all we gave sum, then it'll go ahead and do this, which is just 2 cells. Okay. So sometimes you'll just see the parentheses with again, this could be cells. It could be a single cell. So instead of B1 to B2, it could just be B1, and it would just be that single number you're adding. So it would just be whatever B1 is. It could also be numbers. There we go. Or you'll notice with some functions, it's also text. So some functions do take text or other values to work with. Okay. One last thing to note, you don't have to worry about it too much because I'll show a method in which it could help automate this process for you. But if you were to type out a function all on your own, sometimes in your parameters, you'll have little commas. Commas just means that we're separating different parameters, different arguments. So in the case of sum, this could be a selection of cells we're adding B1 to B2, and then maybe you want to add on something else, maybe another selection like just C2. And you could keep doing commas to keep on adding more and more and more. Some functions have a very specific set of arguments it takes, so all separated by commas. Some of them you could keep on adding to it. But just know again, we have the name and we have the arguments or parameters, what we're feeding the function. Okay, so let's take this to our workbook over here. Okay, so I need to quickly break down what we're seeing here. You'll notice, let's take a look down here on the bottom. A workbook, when it comes to spreadsheets, is kind of what you think of it. Like if you think of it as a physical workbook, maybe a binder, you'll have different sections, different information that you're keeping track of. The same goes here for Excel. So the workbook itself is a collection of something we call sheets, in which you could place different tables or calculations into. So along down here on the bottom, you'll notice that there's different tabs with little names. The one that's currently selected is commissions. You'll see it has an underline on it and it has a highlight around the tab. If I want to switch to another sheet, go to the name and click on it, and you'll notice it changes the information before us. So you could think of it as like flipping through a binder, again with different sheets, different tables on it. If I want to go to this tab tables, I could click it. There we go. And it shows up for me. Real quick, if you want to add another sheet, maybe you're doing more calculations, you'll see this little plus symbol here. And when it says new sheet, you could click on it. And we could start a completely new sheet from here. It gives it automatic names, like in this case, sheet 1. If you want to change that, just right click on the tab and you'll find a rename button. Then it highlights the name and you could just go ahead and rename it. I'm going to call this demo. Click enter. There we go. And if you want to delete it, again, right click on that tab and there's a delete option. So that's some quick sheet navigation for you. You're going to have to use different sheets in your project, so just make sure you're going to the correct one accordingly. Okay. Now let's go ahead and start using functions. So let me find here. Let's go ahead and let's try out that AutoSum again, but differently. So let's say, I know there's this down here, but let's say we want to add all of these commissions. Make sure you're in the sheet commissions and go to cell E15. Go ahead and insert, and I'm going to have you up here in the navigation in the ribbon, go to the formulas tab. Okay. So you'll be using this tab a lot when it comes to any function, more specifically over here on the left side, the function library group. There are a lot of different groupings of functions you could use from. I'll go over it more in depth a little later, but do know your AutoSum is also available here. It works the same way as in chapter 1. But let's say maybe we're not aware of the AutoSum and we want to find a function for getting the sum of these values. I recommend going over to the far left button, insert function. So again, formulas tab, function library group, click on insert function, and we get this window that pops up here, this dialog box. Now, this acts as kind of a little search feature for any function that Excel provides for you. This box here under the search for function is our little search entry. So you could delete the text inside. And if we want to find, if it deletes, I'll go ahead and delete it. There we go. And if we want to find a function for adding the sum, so maybe we're aware of the name of the function in Excel, we'll just type in sum. It could be all lowercase. And then click go. So they'll go ahead and find the function for you. There we go. And you'll notice down here in the selected function, it filters out every function that has sum in the name of it. There are different ones, so there's, again, a lot of functions you could choose from. But for us, we just want sum. So make sure you go ahead and make sure it's highlighted in that blue. Notice if I click SUMIF, that's highlighted in blue. Let's make sure we click sum. And one thing to note, you'll see down here how this function is used, both typing it out and what it does. So in this case, it says adds all the numbers in a range of cells. And we'll see, there you go, you see the sum name and the parameters that are given. The ... means that you could just keep on adding more parameters, more numbers to add. Okay, but once you've selected the function you want, so make sure it's highlighted down here, click OK. And this is what I highly recommend using for any function. So again, you could type out, notice over here in E15, it has the typed out eSum parentheses E5 colon E14. You could type that out on your own, but at least for this course, I recommend using the function arguments. Typing it out is only good when you fully understand, one, how the function works and how to use it. For this course, it's perfectly fine using this function arguments dialog box. I highly recommend using it. Okay, but what we're seeing here is each of these boxes is the arguments or the parameters that you could put in. So for instance, number 1, it's giving me a range. It's actually it automatically put in E5 to E14. For practice purposes, go ahead and delete what's in that box. And for us, if we wanted to select our own numbers to add, it still works just like how we did our formulas. You could type it in yourself, so you could say E5 to E14, or again, delete whatever's in that box, or you could just select it. In this case, we want a selection of cells, so again, go to your E5, hold down, and then drag down to E14. There we go. And it also includes those values. You could get a confirmation if you're getting the right values as well by looking over here to the right of the arguments. This will give you what values are in that selection or what is in that cell. Okay. Now with the sum, you could keep on adding more numbers. So notice if I click into number 2, I could keep adding and it gives me number 3, 4, and such. Okay. And when you are done, then you just hit OK. And the function is finalized in the cell you selected, and it does the calculations with the commissions. And you'll see here up at the top in the formula bar, there we go. We see the sum name and the parentheses, but we see the actual calculation when we hit enter. So now when any of these commissions changes, that will automatically update as well. Okay. So that's some fun things you could do with functions. If you ever, so let's say if you ever accidentally put in the wrong values, let me double click into this cell to show you. So if you ever accidentally put in the wrong values or you feel like you did a function incorrectly, you could always click in and type in the values again into this cell. Or again, I recommend, so make sure you click into the function that you're using. More specifically, I recommend clicking into the function name. So have your insertion point somewhere in that name that you want to edit. And then go up in the formulas tab, function library group, hit insert function, and it takes you back to those function arguments. So you could edit any of the parameters needed to get your desired result. And once you make those changes, hit OK. There we go, and it does the calculation. So keep that in mind if you ever need to edit any function. So any of the other functions I'm showing you right now, you could go ahead and do that. Okay. So that's a general idea of function usage. I'm going to go over some specific functions you'll be using in your projects or even in the future, just so you could still have a hands-on idea of how it works and even what it entails, the extent to this process. Okay. So this part, we're going to go over something called SUMIF. For this, we're still going to be on our commissions sheet, and you're going to go to cell E18. In E18, I'm going to have you go back to your insert function. So go ahead and click on the button. And we're going to search in this box for SUMIF. So just type in SUMIF, all together, no spaces. Again, it does not have to be capitalized in this search function. And you're going to hit go. And there we go. You can see the SUMIF. SUMIFs is very different. So make sure you select SUMIF. This function, notice the explanation down here, says adds to cells specified by a given condition or criteria. What this means is what we're going to do is we're going to have it add up any numbers here, any of the commissions, if it is from Cameron Park. You'll see how it does that in a moment. But let's hit OK to start this function. Okay. So you'll notice this one has a different set of parameters than just a normal sum. I'll tell you specifically what parameters you need to put what information in. So like this one, range, there we go. You don't need to know exactly how it works, although it does help to understand a little bit. Every time you click into the boxes for the parameters, you'll see an explanation down here. In this case, the range is the range of cells you want evaluated. This means, so in the case of, hey, we want to add a commission based on if the branch is Cameron Park, that means we need to check the branch. So here, I'm going to select for the range D5 to D14. There we go. And you'll see that it confirms our values still on the right. Now I'm going to go over to click into the criteria parameters, and you'll see the explanation here is criteria is the condition or criteria in the form of a number, expression, or text that defines which cells will be added. What this means is the criteria is how we evaluate each of our range. So again, we're trying to see if Cameron Park, if the branch is Cameron Park, it will add the value in commissions. If not, it will not add it. In this case with the criteria, we could just click into cell C18, which has Cameron Park in it. So what Excel will do is it'll look through each of the range, see if it equals the value in criteria. And if it does, click your cell, click into the sum range box, and you'll see these are the actual cells to sum. So sum range is the actual values we'll be adding up if the branch is Cameron Park. So for this, we're going to go back and select our E5 to E14. Okay. So now when I hit OK, you'll notice that this sum is different from the total sum because it's omitting anything that isn't Cameron Park. All right, so notice that's something you could do with Excel. You could have it do very specific calculations based on what you need. Basically, anything you could think of, there is probably a function for it. Okay, we could do the same in cell E19. Notice that this one, we want to calculate for full sum. So instead of putting cell C18, Cameron Park, into the criteria, you would put C19 into it. We could go through the steps again, but remember I mentioned to you the AutoFill in chapter 1? It still applies for a function. So notice if we go down this line, Excel could catch the pattern that, hey, if this says Cameron Park, So if C18 says Cameron Park and C19 says Folsom, maybe all we're doing is just changing the criteria when we move down. So we could copy this function over by selecting E18, that's our SUMIF function. And remember, to use AutoFill, you want to go to this little green square on the bottom right of the cell. Your cursor will turn into the tiny cross. Click and drag it down to C19 and C20. And when you let go, it does those calculations for you. And you could confirm by clicking into, let's do E19. And you'll see that up here in the formula bar, the criteria is C19. That's Folsom. Same here. You'll see that here, the range and the sum range are kept the same, but it's gone ahead and put in C20, which is Granite Bay. Okay, so those are fun things you could do with AutoFill. Especially for one of the pages, you'll see that there's a lot of rows that you'll be calculating. You don't have to type it in for every single one. You could use your AutoFill. Even then, you don't have to drag it down. Let me undo what I did. So I did Control Z. You could use a little backwards button. I believe it should work for this, but you could simply just hover your mouse over the AutoFill box. So remember that little green square at the bottom right, double click, and it kind of did what I wanted, except it extended it all the way down here. But notice, even just double clicking, Excel will go ahead and go to the end of what it assumed was the table or the values, and it'll still keep that pattern. If I want to get rid of these, I could just select these cells and again just hit delete or backspace. Okay. But again, make good use of that AutoFill. It will be a lifesaver, especially again, you'll see when you look at the project, you'll see why I am highly suggesting you using it. Okay. One last function I'm going to show. So again, all functions work the same. You could use the insert function accordingly to put in those parameters. But this will show you the extent to what it can do. So go to your by policy tab. There we go. So your by policy sheet, this one, I just need text to work with because functions don't just work with, they don't just work with numbers, they could work with text as well. For instance, let's see. We have a bunch of names in this sheet, and maybe I want to do something to quickly combine those names. So of course you could go to a cell here. In H6, I'm going to put in a title full name. And of course you could type it in yourself. You could do Bob Lingle and just keep going down, down, down. But we're not going to do that. We're going to have Excel do it for us. Okay, so go ahead, click into cell H7, and we're going to use something called CONCAT, which is concatenation, meaning putting stuff together, putting text together. So we selected H7, go to Insert Function. Remember, that's in your Formulas tab. And for this, we're going to search for, I'm going to delete the text in here and search for CONCAT, C-O-N-C-A-T. Click Go. And it should be this one. So don't do the concatenate. It works similarly, but differently from how I show in this course. Make sure you have just the CONCAT. Let's select it and click OK. Okay. Now what this will do is kind of works like the sum, but any text we add into these boxes, it's going to string it together. So for instance, if I want the full name first, last name last, then I could just go ahead and select the cells with the names. So text 1, I'm going to put the first name. So in our case, for our first row, that's C7, should be Bob. And in text 2, I'm going to do the last name. We're going to do B7, which is Lingle. Now, if some of you know how CONCAT already works, you may be wondering, Miss Ojeda, there's one problem about that. I'll show you in a moment. Go ahead and click OK. And you'll see it does put the names together, but there is no space in between. That's because even though CONCAT will string text together, you still need to tell it specifically what you want. So let's go back in and edit it to have it do very specific things. So once more, you could edit by double-clicking into the cell. Make sure you have your insertion point in the function name, and then go to your insert function, click, and we have our function arguments again. Okay, so if we want a space in between Bob and Lingle, then we actually need text 2 to be the space. And to do that, you're going to do quotations, type in the space, so actually hit the space key and do your quotes again. Then in text 3, we could put in the last name, B7, and you'll see you could actually confirm what will come out by this little preview down here, Bob Lingle, with a space. So when I click OK, there we go. We have Bob Lingle with the space in between. Once we have that concat feature done, then you could just use your autofill to, I believe the double click should work here. Let's give it a try. So again, select the cell with the function you want to copy down. Go to that little green box at the bottom right with your cursor turns into the cross and double click. And okay, it doesn't seem to work. Usually it works when Excel detects kind of a table going on, but we could still do the click and drag down so it could do all of those names. Let me autofit this column. There we go. Perfect. So that's concat. And I do know that concat sometimes can run into issues with some students. If you ever mess up on a function and you did the autofill, you could still correct it. Just make sure you correct the very first cell. So let me double click in here and I'm going to click in insert function. And let's say I wanted to keep adding more. So maybe I want to put in Bob's branch. Okay. So if I want to do that and I want to format it correctly, then let me do here quotations, space, and maybe I want the branch in parentheses. So you'll type in the quotations, the starting parentheses, close it off with the quotations. Basically think of anything inside of the quotations is going to be injected into our strung along string of text. So you'll see down here in the preview, you have the space with the parentheses. If I don't do that space, then it's going to stick to the last name. So down to the punctuation, it's going to be like that. Okay. In text 5, I'll go ahead and add in the branch. So in the case of the first row, it's going to be D7. There we go. And if I want to add in more, the more parameters you add, you're going to have to scroll down with this little feature over here. I recommend using the little arrows. There we go. And in text 6, we're going to close it off with the last parentheses. So quotations, parentheses, quotations. Okay. And now let's hit OK to confirm. So we fixed that first row, and if we wanted to copy all the way down, then I could, hopefully the double click works now, but you could use the autofill to update everything. So you don't have to delete everything and start from scratch. Just correct the first entry and autofill. Okay. So those are using functions, and again, I highly suggest exploring this to its full extent. Notice up here in the library, there are different groupings of functions. So if you're working with anything financially related, click on the drop down here for the financial, and these are all functions that are related to financial uses. The logical is here. This is something I do recommend messing around a little bit with, so you could find some videos on this. Very fun. Text. CONCAT is here as well, so this is anything related to doing stuff with text. Even dates and times, it's in here. If you have math homework, you could use Excel to do some calculations, although just make sure you're still learning those formulas. And so on, and you could still explore with the insert function. If you want to keep exploring different functions, you could do a Google search for does Excel have a function for doing such and such? You could look into that. But in your Excel Chapter 2 resources page, I did include the Microsoft Excel formulas information page. If we click into it, this is again, it shows you what formulas you can, or how to use formulas. Or you'll notice in these tabs, there's different groupings. This one says logical, and it gives you a list of different functions you could use and what they do. Even in the more functions tab, there we go. It shows you a lot of commonly used functions, what they do, and how to use it. So really explore those in depth. Another way to know what a function does, let me use this CONCAT for instance. Let me double click into it. And notice when I hover over the name or anywhere inside of this, we have a little preview of how the function is made up. So the name with all of its parameters. So if you're typing it out, this could also help you with knowing where the parameters are located, because the parameters order does matter. But notice the CONCAT, when I hover over it in that little in this little pop-up, it highlights for me, meaning it's clickable. When I click it, over here on the right, there we go. We get a little pane that pops up with information about that function. It also shows you some examples of how to use it and what it can do. This applies to pretty much any other function you include. So this is another way to practice with it. Like I could go to, let me exit, escape here. Let me go to any other cell and let's find something with date and time. Let's do the month. There we go. And notice in the function arguments, there's also a little link for help on this function. This one will take you to a page that gives you a description of the function, how to use it, and there we go. The majority of them should have examples of how to use it. Okay. But that is chapter 2. So again, all functions work the same way, or at least using them works similarly. It's just what parameters are you using and what you are calculating. Okay. But again, highly recommend exploring it. This is a very big skill to have, especially for data entry. If you're interested in data analysis, it helps. Or even just, again, anything you're doing in your day-to-day life. Or for academics, you can make a spreadsheet for yourself and use functions to help you out. Sometimes I do this again for grading in courses, keeping track of grades. Other times I do this to help with making sure some students are on track with certain courses, certain criteria. I'll use functions to help me figure who I need to contact and such. All right. But again, keep exploring and keep practicing. That's the only way to learn. If you have any questions, feel free to contact me or attend the student hours. Have a good one.